as chaperone in only the loosest sense of the word, had breakfasted meals en suite. He knew for a fact he employed 46 at Killyleagh. Thus far he'd seen only 3. And then, of course, there was Avery Quinn, but she was hardly a servant. She was... Well, what matter? It had been several years since his visit to the castle, and hers had coincided. Indeed, he might never see Avery Quinn again, because he could not envision Sophie living here as Killyleagh's chatelaine. And during those rare times Sophie was in residence, he imagined Avery would disappear. He could not imagine 2 women with less in common. His small scholar liked Killyleagh's solitude, and Sophie was far better suited to the bright artifice and sophistication of London. As, he reminded himself, was he. "Strand, is that you? I can't see. 'Tis too dark," a female voice announced from the doorway. "Do not think I shall stand for such cheese-sparing measures when I am Marchioness. We shall have lights to rival Carlton House." Strand looked up from the fire, relieved to be distracted from the uneasy passage his thoughts had been taking. His bride-to-be had arrived. Sophie North frowned pettishly as she peered about. The great hall looked just as dim, grim, and uninviting as the rest of this god-forsaken castle. Only the muffled moan of the wind flinging itself against the thick stone walls broke the eerie silence. At the far end of the room, a wing-back chair stood facing a huge bed of embers in a hearth so high a man could walk into it upright. The only other furnishing was the monstrous banquet table. "One might as well dine in a charnel house," Sophie muttered. "Best get used to it, Sophie," her father said from beside her. "Strand's ancestral home, don't you know?" Ancestral home? Bah! Who would willingly live in such a place? She knew little about Giles Dalton's immediate family. No one did. His father had not taken his place in society, seemingly content to stay in this god-forsaken castle with his books and letters. Strand's mother, the Marquis's second wife, had relocated to Italy with Giles's sister long ago, before Giles had become heir to the marquisdom. The first Marchioness had died in childbirth. Sophie didn't recall much about the first heir, other than that the boy hadn't lived long either. She had never thought to ask why. She wasn't interested. "Strand can stay here for all I care. I shall be in the London townhouse until I can find better." She'd no more live here than she would in 7 Dials. Where is Strand? Why isn't he here? Before her father could reply, a deep, masculine voice spoke. "How happy the groom must be whose bride counts the hours she doesn't spend in his company." Sophie wheeled around looking for Strand, the owner of that deep, velvety voice. A dark shadow moved in the chair before the fire, and a log fell suddenly. The burst of light lining the famously classic profile, curling over a strong, long-fingered hand, and tracing a muscular leg stretched out before him. It caught the glint of a silvered eye, and burnished the dark glow in the shock of tumbled guinea-gold hair. Giles Dalton, Marquis of Strand. He was as handsome a man as Sophie had ever seen, even now, about to enter his 30th year. And if the deep shadows beneath his eyes, and the lines bracketing his sculpted Roman nose in any way diminished what was said to have once been Apollonian looks, well, she'd not known him then, and thus had nothing to compare this version of Strand to that earlier one, and this version of Strand in no manner disappointed. He hesitated just an instant, and then, with fluid grace, rose to his feet. The barbaric surroundings should have dwarfed him, made him look small, should have rendered him insignificant. It couldn't. He owned this room as surely as he owned any London salon. The exquisite cut of his cobalt blue coat, his flawlessly arranged cravat, the buff-coloured trousers that moulded to his long legs, were only trappings. Even without them he would draw the eye and rivet the attention.